All right, hello, hello. We're going to give this a couple of seconds just to let some folks join us and join in. Super excited about today's topic. We're going to get started in just a second. All right, so welcome to this first part of this three-part series, Embrace the Power of Boundaries. And today I'm going to be talking about why boundaries are essential for introverts in relationships, especially if you're in relationships with extroverts. And when I say relationships, that doesn't necessarily mean romantic relationships. It could mean coworkers, friends, family, so work, social, really any type of relationship, any type of environment where you're engaging with other people on a regular basis. Having boundaries are going to be really, really helpful as an introvert to start to bring into those relationships. So thank you so much for being here. If you are watching the replay, thank you for watching the replay. But if you are here with me, I would love for you to just drop a quick comment in to let me know you're here. And if you are willing to share what you're excited or hoping to learn today, then I would love to hear that too. So drop that in the comments and let me know. So I am super excited to be hosting this three-part series because I feel like, well, actually not even feel like, I know this from working with my clients. Boundaries are something that is really hard for my clients to set up with. They struggle with this. And I know that for introverts, this can feel really challenging. We're going to get into why that is a little bit later in this talk. But when you learn to set really strong boundaries, that is a key piece of growing your confidence as an introvert. I like to talk about getting to the place where you feel unconditionally confident. And this is a key piece of it, establishing boundaries. But setting boundaries is also really, really important for protecting your well-being, for honoring your well-being as an introvert. So a little bit about me. If this is your first time joining me on one of my weekly talks, let me take a moment before we dive in to introduce myself. I'm Vicki Regina. I'm a certified mindset and confidence coach for introverts. I have been coaching for about 7 years, and I have spent hundreds of hours supporting and helping my introverted clients to feel more empowered and to feel more confident in leaning into their introversion, embracing it, understanding it, loving it, so that they can use that as a vehicle for feeling more comfortable putting themselves out there, for stepping confidently out of their comfort zone and finally thriving on their own terms. So I'm super passionate about this and love to talk about this. So yeah, and the reason that I focus exclusively on introverts is because I myself am a hardcore introvert. So I understand the struggles that come with being an introvert in what feels like our very extrovert leaning biased society. And I didn't initially start out by working with introverts, but a few years into being a coach, this sounds a little cliched, but I kind of just had that calling that I really wanted to focus exclusively on introverts because I feel like for a lot of introverts, they feel, actually, again, I know this from talking with a lot of introverts, that for a lot of introverts, they feel like even the label introvert is not something that's positive, is not something that they are excited about, is not something that they feel is a good thing. And they even feel like being an introvert holds them back, that they're at a disadvantage because they're an introvert. And what I like to say is that introversion doesn't hold you back. Introversion does not limit you. It is your thoughts, your beliefs, your understanding of what you think it means to be an introvert. That's what holds you back. And those are things that we can fix. We can fix what you think about it and your understanding about it, because you do not need to fix being an introvert. So this is why I do what I do. All right. Hi, Elise. I hope I'm saying your name right. So let me know if I'm not saying your name right, but thank you for being here. All right. So today I am going to be talking about, again, why boundaries are essential for introverts in relationships, especially, again, if you're in relationships with extroverts. And just to reiterate, when I say relationships, that can be any relationship. It can be a romantic relationship, a social relationship, a work or professional relationship. Again, any sort of relationship where you are engaged with other humans on a regular basis. So specifically what I'm going to be talking about is I'm going to be talking about what boundaries are, just in case that's new for you. I'm going to talk about why boundaries are important. I'm going to then dive into why or how boundaries contribute to healthy relationships. I'm going to talk about why introverts tend to struggle with setting boundaries. And if that is you, I'm going to share 3 strategies that you can use to start to overcome those challenges so that you can start to actually put some boundaries in place in your life. So, as we are going through this, if you have any questions at all, please feel free to drop your questions in the comments section. I will keep an eye on that, and we'll get to, if I don't get to it right away, don't worry, I will make sure to get to all questions before wrapping up today's talk. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and get started. So what are boundaries? I like to think of boundaries as limits or guidelines on what is, hi, Brianna. So I like to think of boundaries as limits or guidelines to what is acceptable in terms of how to treat you, how to not treat you. Um, Boundaries are wonderful to put in place for your relationships, for your personal space, for your emotional well being, and for introverts in particular, your energetic well being. So, again, it's just guidelines or limits or expectations around how you need to be treated for your well being. So, it helps to create and support healthy relationships and to create respectful interactions between you and others. I like to think of boundaries and having boundaries and communicating boundaries because it can be a little scary sometimes. I like to think of it as like your own personal owner's manual. So it's actually like a gift. Your boundaries are a gift that you're giving to other people so they understand you, so they know how to treat you, so there's no guesswork. It's like when you go out and buy a car. I mean, I get that most of us don't sit there and like pull open the owner's manual of your car that you just bought and read through everything, but you have it in case inevitably some random weird light comes on the dashboard and you're like, what does that mean? You can then pull out the owner's manual and you know exactly what it means and what to do. So it's kind of the same thing with our boundaries. We're letting people know this is what that light means when it goes off. This is what I need, and this is what you can do to make sure that the light never goes off or rarely goes off. So it really is a gift in terms of your relationships with other people, so that people, it takes the guesswork out. They just know they know what you need, they know what your preferences are. So let's actually dive into why it's important to have boundaries. There's many reasons, but I'm going to touch on 3 specific reasons. One of these I've kind of started to go, actually, several of these I've kind of started to go into a little bit, but one of the main reasons that it's really important to have boundaries in your relationships is that it protects and preserves your well being. So, boundaries are really ensuring that your values, your opinions, your emotions, your feelings, your personal space, all of that is respected and that it is protected. So having boundaries and communicating those boundaries helps to prevent situations where you may feel overwhelmed or exhausted or taken advantage of, or God forbid, exploited or anything like that. It helps to prevent those situations. So boundaries also let you they let you assert yourself. They let you to establish your own autonomy, and they allow you to prioritize your self-care. And all of that leads to improved mental and emotional health. Now, another reason that boundaries are so important, and we're going to dig into this more in a minute, but it is a key to building healthy relationships. And this is especially helpful if you are in any sort of relationships in your life with extroverts, because they don't extrovert society in general, whether it's your introverts or extroverts, a lot of people misunderstand what it means to be an introvert. And so being able to communicate what you need is going to be key in establishing those healthy relationships. Again, personal relationships, professional relationships, because these boundaries provide a framework for trust, for respect, and for understanding each other. It helps to create those clear expectations, and it helps to minimize or prevent misunderstandings or conflicts, which introverts don't love conflict. So having boundaries can actually help to minimize those down the road. And it also just encourages open and honest communication. And that is a big part of what leads to stronger relationships, stronger connections, stronger trust, and it fosters a stronger environment for mutual respect and connection. And then finally, the third reason, I mean, again, there's many reasons, but the third reason that I wanted to touch on why it's really important to have boundaries in your relationships is because it helps to build stronger confidence in yourself. So just the act of becoming aware of what your needs are and where you need to set boundaries. And then, I mean, that means that you have to value yourself enough to even take a look at that and to evaluate that for yourself. And then to actually speak up and share that with other people, that takes confidence. That takes courage. And not only is every time you communicate boundaries, is that increasing that feeling of confidence in yourself and strengthening your courage in yourself, it's also communicating that to other people in your life because they're going to recognize, whether consciously or subconsciously, they're going to recognize that you value yourself, which is going to encourage them to value you as well. So, since I'm focusing this three-part series on boundaries with people in our lives, especially if you have extroverts in your lives, I want to take a little bit of time just to dig in a little bit more with why or how boundaries really contribute to having healthy relationships. So there's a few reasons that I want to touch on. Again, this is the any of these topics, I could honestly probably spend an hour on each one of them. But I wanted to touch on just the three main areas where I feel like having boundaries really contribute to a healthy relationship. And the first one I've talked a little bit about already, but it builds an environment of mutual respect and trust. So when you are communicating your needs and your preferences and your boundaries to the people in your life, and your partner, your loved ones, your coworkers, your friends, your family, your children, whomever it is, when you are sharing those, and that's going to allow them to feel like they can also share with you what their needs and preferences and boundaries are. And so when you're having these conversations and you're sharing that and you're listening, it's creating this space for genuine respect for each other, for your feelings, for your needs, for, again, your autonomy. And that's creating an environment where both parties are going to feel safe. They're going to feel heard. They're going to feel seen. They're going to feel respected. And that is how you build trust within a relationship. So when boundaries are being communicated and they're being honored, the trust in the relationship, the trust in each other is strengthened. And this goes across professional, personal relationships. So if you are not setting boundaries in your relationships, you're missing out on key opportunities to develop deeper trust and connection in your relationships. So I want to invite you, if you feel like boundaries are a little bit scary, I want to invite you to see them as an opportunity for even more awesomeness, amazingness in your relationships. Now, the next reason that I feel like boundaries are essential for setting up healthy relationships is clear communication and expectation. So it goes back to that owner's manual idea. So when you are communicating what your needs are, what your desires are, what your preferences are, then that is going to help others to understand you. And so that's going to help prevent situations where they accidentally or unintentionally say something or do something that hurts you, compromises you, drains you, overwhelms you, possibly minimizes you in some way. So you are helping them to be a better partner for you. And it's also helping them to not accidentally do something that's going to upset you, which is then going to lead to conflict and anger and hurt and all of those things. And none of us want that, right? So, so confidence and courage, key words. Absolutely. That's a huge piece of building strong relationships. And sharing and talking about boundaries, having that dialogue, having that conversation, it creates the space for healthy conversations, for negotiations, for compromise, for finding common ground, right? That's beautiful for building out healthy relationships. So when that is happening, when those conversations are happening, both parties are having the opportunity to gain a deeper understanding of each other's needs. And that is going to create healthier and more harmonious interactions. And again, this can be at work. This can be with your in-laws. This could be with your best friend. It doesn't matter. These principles apply the same. It may look differently depending on the type of relationship, but these principles apply the same across the board. And then the final big benefit that I think that of having or of how boundaries contribute to healthy relationships is it allows you as the individual to practice autonomy and to prioritize your self-care and your emotional well-being. And for introverts, this is key. Our needs are very different than what extroverts need. And there's a just a vast misunderstanding in our society, and recognition of what introverts need. Even though introverts are the majority of our population, there's a huge misunderstanding. And so it is on us as introverts to speak up for ourselves, because other people aren't going to understand. And they're not trying to hurt you by not understanding it. They just never have been exposed to it, and never have been had the opportunity to realize that there is a difference. So it's on us to have to speak up for ourselves in order to communicate those needs, and to essentially educate them on what it is to be an introvert. And so when you are in a relationship, professional, personal, whatever, where you feel free to be able to speak up and share your thoughts and your opinions and your needs and your preferences and your limits, then that is going to strengthen your self-esteem. That is going to help you feel more connected to who you are. And you're going to feel more empowered to assert yourself and to speak up for yourself, and to go for your goals, and to go for your interests, because you know you're in a relationship that supports that. You're in a relationship, again, professionally, personally, where you're understood and you're respected and you're honored and you're valued. Okay. All right, so now that we've talked about what boundaries are, we have talked about why boundaries are important, let's take a moment, and we've actually talked about how they contribute to healthy relationships, which we all want. Let's take a moment to start to explore why introverts tend to struggle with setting boundaries. And with that said, I don't want to say that extroverts find it super easy to set boundaries. I'm not trying to imply that at all. But since I focus exclusively on introverts, I do want to speak to the fact that I know from working with my clients that this is particularly challenging for people. So one of the reasons that I feel like introverts do struggle with setting boundaries is that we have a tendency to prioritize other people's needs over our own. And that is, especially if you're a woman, like society tells us that that is how we have to be. And so this could be for many reasons. I feel a lot of times that's because we don't like conflict. With conflict, we don't know what we're going to have to deal with. We don't know how much energy that's going to take for us to have to deal with something. So it's easier for us to focus on maintaining harmony, even if that means that we don't end up prioritizing our own needs. So it could, sometimes we do that because we're afraid if we speak up for what we need, and we're afraid of sharing our boundaries, that it could lead to tension, or it could lead to disappointment in our relationships. And so that can make it really challenging to speak up. And even just that anticipation that there may be conflict can make it really hard to speak up and share our boundaries. Yes, that is a perfect point. That's, introverts in many cases, we don't know our own needs. I was talking with someone just the other day who was saying that. She said that for years she just kind of went along with what everybody else said. And so when she got a little bit older, it was like she realized, I don't even know what I need in my life. That's a huge thing. So actually, I'm going to get into the tips in a minute there, but that actually ties in to one of the tips for overcoming some of these challenges. Now, another reason that I feel like introverts tend to struggle with this is because we have this fear of judgment or rejection. I mean, that's something that I think everybody has fears of being judged or rejected. I don't think that's exclusive to introverts, but I do feel like because we're a bit more sensitive to having attention on us and having to deal with conflict, this fear of rejection or judgment can be a little bit harsher for us, if you will. We're worried a little bit more about whether people are going to, reject what we have to say or perceive us in a not so flattering light if we speak up for ourselves. And that fear of negative consequences, again, it goes back to the fear of conflict. That fear of negative consequences can have us keeping our mouth shut and not saying anything. And so, sometimes it can be scary to speak up. So another reason I think that introverts struggle with setting boundaries is that we have a strong need for solo time to recharge. We need that. Extroverts don't need that. We need that, though. And that's not necessarily something that is understood by our society. And so it can be really hard to speak up for ourselves and say that. Let's say you've had a really busy, a really very heavy people week, and it comes to the weekend and your social battery is on zero and you just need some time to yourself. It can be really hard to say to your partner, I don't really want to go to the barbecue tomorrow because I'm exhausted and I just need some time to myself. It can be really hard to say that because you don't want to hurt their feelings. You don't want to be judged as like, oh, well, you're just a loner. You don't want somebody to tell you that you're wrong. Like, oh, you've had a really hard week. Well, staying at home by yourself is just going to make it worse. You don't want to sit at home all alone. Come to the party. It's, that'll help much better. It can be really hard. I had my ex-boyfriend from like 10 years ago. Anytime I had, I wanted to ask for some time alone because I was exhausted, he would say something like, oh, well, you don't want to spend time with me. And it was just so I would feel so guilty. I couldn't even enjoy and get, recharged during my time alone because I just felt so guilty that I had hurt his feelings. And he never could quite understand that it wasn't about him. It was just me needing time with myself. So it got easier just to never ask for it. It got easier just to never speak up until I was like literally like on the ground, exhausted. So it can be very challenging because of the misconceptions in our world. So if you are an introvert that feels this way, what in the world are you supposed to do? Like, how can you overcome that? So I want to share 3 tips that you can use, or 3 strategies that you can use to start to overcome this and start to set boundaries in your life. And the first is, we started to touch on this a minute ago, but it's self-reflection and self-awareness. You have to start by looking at yourself and becoming aware of what are your needs? What do you need? It's also taking the time to understand what it actually means to be an introvert. If you feel like being an introvert is not something that's good, is something that is holds you back, or you're at a disadvantage because you're an introvert, then I lovingly say to you that you don't really understand yet what it means to be an introvert. So you've got to start there, because you've got to get to the place where you recognize that there are biological differences between being an introvert and an extrovert, that being an introvert doesn't limit you. You're not at a disadvantage because you're an introvert. And it's recognizing that we have just different needs and preferences than extroverts, and both are equally valid. And so when you get to that space, then it's that self-reflection on, what do I need? What are my needs? What boundaries do I maybe already have that are already being crossed that I don't even realize? So if you've never set a boundary before in your life, if you've never even thought about it, I guarantee you still have boundaries in place right now that are being crossed. And so becoming aware of that, becoming aware of your needs, and becoming aware that, hey, there's nothing wrong with me. I have different preferences. When you put all of that together, that's going to allow you to start to be aware of the boundaries that you need, or the ones that are being crossed. So once you have that awareness, then the next strategy is to start to practice effective communication, because once you are aware of boundaries that you need to put in place in your life, you're going to have to communicate those to people. And that, again, can be very, very scary. So I recommend, in that case, you have to start small, maybe not even with setting a boundary. It could be like, if, maybe your family goes out to dinner, and speak up and say, well, this is where I want to go. So maybe it's starting there, just to get the practice of speaking up for yourself. And then once you have more practice with that, then it's learning how to effectively communicate boundaries. That's something I work on with my clients, and I even role play that with them so that they can go and start to have those conversations with confidence. And then that goes into the final strategy, is to start gradually setting up those boundaries. So once you've practiced the communication piece and you're aware of the boundaries that you need to have, it's starting to communicate those. And it's not, let's say, for example, you realize, oh my gosh, I need to set like 10 different boundaries. It's not going and setting all 10 at once. That would be overwhelming for you. It would be overwhelming for the person on the receiving end of that. So it really is about picking the low-hanging fruit. What's the easiest one to communicate? What's the boundary? Who's the person that's going to be the easiest person to communicate with? Who's going to be the most open to it? And you start with 1, maybe 2. You get your feet wet with it, and you build your confidence with it. When you practice saying it and somebody receives it and they honor your boundary, you're going to feel more confident. And then you pick another one on the list, and you keep working your way up, and you leave those really challenging ones or hard ones until you build up your confidence and your experience with communicating them, so that it doesn't feel as scary as it would on day 1. And that's how you start to communicate those boundaries. So really quick, I know we're almost at time. I want to just do a real quick recap of what we talked about. So I talked about what boundaries are. We talked about the importance of having them. I talked a little bit more detail about why boundaries are key for having healthy relationships. I shared some insights into why introverts tend to struggle with some common reasons that introverts tend to struggle with setting boundaries. And if any of that resonated with you, I then shared a few strategies that you can start to implement to start gaining that awareness and start to practice setting boundaries in your life. Now, next week, I'm going to be continuing this conversation, and I'm going to be talking about specific boundaries that introverts need in relationships. So I'm going to be talking about boundaries for personal space, alone time. I'm going to talk about specific boundaries for emotional well-being, energetic well-being, and even some boundaries around things like social interactions and events. So it's going to be at the same time next week, 5:30 Eastern on June 15th. So watch out for that invite so that you can make sure to join me. And if this is something that you struggle with, if this is something that you need support with, I am opening up some free coaching spots in my calendar to help you with this. Even if it's not with boundaries, if you're an introvert that struggles with feeling confident as an introvert, you don't understand what it means to be an introvert, or if you really struggle with getting out of your comfort zone, but that's something you want to work with or work on, I'm opening up some free coaching spots. It's a one coaching call. So let me put the link up here. If that is something that you struggle with, then I highly, highly recommend that you grab one of these spots, because I would love to help you with that. And so with that, I'm going to open it up. I'll leave that up here in case you need to grab that. Actually, let me grab the link and put that in the comments so that you can click on it if they are interested in grabbing one of those. Get back to comments. There we go. Whoa. Hang on. There we go. Awesome. And Lori, grab a spot. I would love to chat with you. All right. So now I will, if there's any questions, at all, we got a few more minutes, although I'm happy to stay beyond the 30-minute mark if anybody has questions that they want to drop in, and I'm happy to answer those. If you don't feel comfortable dropping a question in kind of like the public domain here, then feel free to DM me, and I'm happy to answer any questions as well in your DM or in our DMs. So just let me know, and would love to help you all out. And definitely, again, looking forward to next week's session and the third piece as well. All right, so any questions at all? I'll give it another minute or so. Thank you, Brianna. I'm looking forward to part 2 too. You guys are awesome. Thanks for chiming in and leaving some comments today. It always makes it more fun, so thank you. All right, so I'm not seeing any questions come in, which is perfectly fine. That is awesome. So I'm going to wrap things up, but if you think of any questions afterwards, again, please feel free to reach out to me. I would love to answer those questions for you. And again, if you want to grab one of these free coaching sessions, I would love to meet with you and to coach you through something that you're struggling with as an introvert, to help you get some more clarity and insight and confidence. So I look forward to seeing you. So thank you so much, and I'll see you next week.